Okay, in terms of the way things are being lined up as to who's the good guys and who's the bad guys in the world stage, and Zelensky and versus Putin, the Ukrainians versus the Russians, and I don't know if the situations compare. I've made a comment section to a Stick Hexenhammer 666 YouTube video earlier today to kind of put things into perspective, I hope. 1941, the summer of 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, and the question of throwing into war with now that Stalin had become an enemy of Hitler. I don't know that there's a moral case in favor of throwing in with Stalin. I mean, Hitler was bad, but Stalin was bad for the same reasons. The only case for making such a choice would be expediency, but I wonder now what to do. We've already expended a great deal of treasure on behalf of the Ukrainians against the Russians, and I don't approve of Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. It's a bad thing to do, but I wonder if there was a way to fight Hitler without helping Stalin. I mean, to this very day, in Russia today, they teach their school children that they fought the war alone against the German menace, that the Allies were of no help to them. I wonder if the Cold War might have turned out differently. I'm not necessarily advocating what I'm going to describe here, but if we had allowed the Soviets and the Russians to fight it out without us having made any contribution or collaboration with Stalin at all, I wonder if the Cold War might have been a little bit of a different affair. In my comments on the post that Stick Sextonhammer made today, I made that observation. It's impossible to be sure what the outcome would have been. But if, for example, the result of us not helping Stalin, and there's two possibilities as I see it. Either if ours and the British assistance through Lend-Lease to the Soviet Union during that time was much more significantly of aid to the Russians than the Russians to this day would acknowledge, then not having helped them, well, the Russians probably would have beat the Germans anyway. But they might not have been as militarily powerful at the end of it as they were when Germany surrendered. Also add to it the fact that they didn't enter the war against Japan because they had a similar separate peace kind of agreement with the Japanese as they had with Germany, the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. There was a Japanese counterpart to that, and it held throughout the entire war. The Russians didn't actually uh, agree to fight against the Japanese until after Potsdam, which was after the German surrender. And who's to say? I'm one of those that believes that the atomic bomb did make a difference. It shortened the war by a significant amount. Planners were seriously looking forward to fighting going on against Japan had the bomb not been used. Well into 1946, Operation Coronet, I believe, which was MacArthur's part of the plan, was the Olympic was the invasion of the Western Island that would have been under the command of Nimitz, and Coronet was MacArthur's part of the operation. And according to the planning metrics, Olympic was to have gotten underway maybe sometime in the middle of November 1945, and the earliest target date to commence Operation Coronet was somewhere around March of 1946. And who knows how long the fighting would have gone on, based on what those who had fought the Japanese in the Pacific knew what it was like to fight against them, and they just wouldn't give up. But anyway, if we had fought, now bear in mind, maybe it was necessary, but an alternative would be, could we have beat the Germans, just talking about our fighting against the Germans, could we have beat the Germans without doing it in collaboration with the Russians? Let the Russians sink and swim on their own, because after all, the casus belli of World War II in Europe was the invasion of Poland. And it's kind of funny that the French and the British declared war against Germany over that, but then when the Soviets invaded Poland 2 weeks later, not a peep. And the fact is that whether or not Hitler would have invaded Poland anyway, the fact that he had this agreement with Stalin had his ass covered, at least for a while. Of course, I suppose he meant to stab Stalin in the back sooner or later, and Stalin was really surprised by this. But anyway, the case for not helping Stalin, though, is, well, comment if you know how soon after the invasion of Poland by the Germans first and then the Russians 2 weeks later, that U.S. and British intelligence were aware of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. Comment, let me know, because I'm curious. I don't know what that is, but by all means. And thank you, and subscribe, like, whatever have you, if this makes you think. But as I say, it's a question of similarities, and maybe there's comparisons, maybe there's not. But first, what can we do, really? Are we willing to go to war with Russia over this? We've spent quite a bit of treasure already in assisting the Ukrainians, and I'm not saying that they don't merit that, But bear in mind that, don't think that we're necessarily supporting a government of righteous saints. As if you see Stick Sexenhammer 666's video on it in the wee hours of the morning, you could say that the devil you know or the devil you don't know. But if the government of the Ukraine wins this, and I don't see that much in prospect. Putin has a winning strategy. I don't approve of it, but it's like with what the Russians were up to in Afghanistan in the late 70s and throughout the 80s. The reason why they lost was not because Afghanistan was unconquerable. The dirty little secret was that we waged a covert, clandestine war supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and similar kinds of arrangements there under the rubric of Charlie Wilson, at the same time that the Congress of the United States was turning its attention very adversely towards Reagan administration policy in Central America. The architecture of the clandestine arrangements that we were doing in Afghanistan at the same time was very similar. I suspect that the reason why things worked out differently in Afghanistan, at least, and the Soviets lost that one, was because the Congress kind of averted their gaze, because it was a pet project of one of their own, Charlie Wilson. I have read the book, seen the movie. The movie doesn't quite do it justice, but in any case, there was the same kind of Byzantine architecture and many of the same players, including Iran and the Israelis, were involved in both sides of our policy then. And just that everybody averted their gaze from the kind of clandestine operations we were conducting and supporting. The Mujahideen were kind of the Afghanistan equivalent of the Contras in a way. So anyway, regarding the how soon after the Polish invasion by the Germans and the Russians in 1939 that U.S. and British intelligence became aware of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. If you know, please comment and fill me in, because I've been curious and been unable to find out myself. I mean, it was 13 months between the invasion of Poland, 13 months between August 23rd, 1939 and June 22nd, 1941. I wonder when it was in that interval, if any, British and U.S. intelligence were aware of the pact.